On this episode of the Career Musician Podcast, we have eclectic composer bassist Viktor Krauss, and he has been a presence in the Nashville, Tennessee area since 1992 with nearly 500 album credits as either a bassist, composer, songwriter, or producer. He's been Lyle Lovett's primary bassist since 1994, and his other credits include jazz great Bill Frisell, James Taylor, Sheryl Crow, Robert Plant, Alison Krauss, Tom Jones, Carly Simon, Jerry Douglas, Chet, Atkins, Larry Carlton, and literally the list goes on. Perhaps the best part is a little special section at the end of this interview that you are not going to want to miss about how career musicians can sustain themselves in the long term with some other business ideas. Right here on the Career Musician Podcast with yours truly, Nomad. Viktor Krauss, welcome to the Career Musician.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we just discovered that we have a few mutual friends back in Nashville.
Yes.
Yeah, and you were telling me that you moved to Nashville in '92. Is that right?
Yes, I'm from Champaign, Illinois originally, and I was starting to make a little bit of a commute back and forth a year out of college, and then it just kind of started to feel like this would be a good fit, and it was manageable drive for a little while, and then kind of did a little research on that commute and seemed like, okay, well, maybe this would be a good choice to, for the next step.
Yeah, that's so awesome. It's funny because I ended up in Nashville in '97 from South Florida, New York originally, but I think, that was still the tail end in the '90s, the early, mid, and late '90s was still the tail end of those big sessions that were musicians, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, it was still a really great time. I mean, for the music business, up until, I would say up until like 99, 2000, or even 2002, where it felt like you were still kind of before limited pressing became the norm for for the musicians union and big budgets and only place you could record is in a commercial studio, so there had to be a budget and that was available in order to pay people like that. And,
right. I'm so glad you brought that up. For those listening who might not know what Viktor means by limited pressing, in the union, you have different scales, different wages in which the musicians are paid. And one of them is called limited pressing, which means that they made less copies of the quote unquote album or CDs or whatever. And therefore they paid everybody less money because the budget was smaller. So I'm so glad you brought that up because nowadays, some 15, 20 years later, that terminology isn't as much as in our daily vernacular as some other terminology, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess with the union, I am a strong believer in the union in terms of what it can do for you in terms of protecting what sets the norm for what as musicians are paid. And a lot of the time, it comes in handy when you're trying to negotiate a session. That you say, well, I'm just fine with the union, either limited pressing, low budget master or master scale, or even better yet, double scale if you can get it. But it is helpful in terms of being able to negotiate a little easier with somebody who doesn't really know what to pay you. If you don't want to insult them by getting making it have sticker shock, or you don't want to underpay yourself. So that's kind of handy. And then just everything with the special payments and reuses is nice as well.
Once again, and I believe in the same. I'm a proponent of it. When I came out here to LA back in 2005, in Nashville, we call it on the card, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In LA, they say contract. It's a little different.
Okay, yeah.
But it basically means that you're using a union agreement, right? To say that, hey, as the musician, I am part of a collective. The union represents me in the fact that we have these scales and such. And, and then the other side of that is the production company or the recording company, whatever, the recording label, the record label. You said some really good things in there we have to unpack because I want the young generation to understand if you're doing big I'll use big for lack of a better adjective. If you're doing big sessions, right? Like major label sessions where the artists you're playing for are, big artists, really want to encourage the union. And that's what Victor's saying. That's what you're saying here, through special payments and other things like that. Can you expound on that maybe for people?
Yeah. It's funny. I guess, the special payments, there's sound recording special payments fund, and there's also motion picture special payments fund, which is great. I love the motion picture one. So if you play on a film score or have a song that's placed that was done with a union contract, you get paid again, and for some years, sometimes many times, and those checks come out usually in the summertime, which is always exciting because back in the 90s, some of those could be really big checks.
That's right.
And, they've gotten smaller over time just because a lot of the things aren't done on the card quite as much or under contract. And so it's, there's certain things that you can kind of gauge by what sessions you take, which ones may be your advantage to be, part of the union where you do have to pay dues on that, which doesn't always feel great on the front end. But I mean, there are certain things that really do protect you in the long run. Oh gosh, I was trying to think. There was a Finesse shampoo commercial that I played on years and years ago, and there's been other jingles like that. So if it was done as a union session, anytime that commercial would be played on the air, you'd get paid again. Or in this, also in the same sense as if you play on a song that gets later put onto a compilation, or it gets bumped up from limited pressing to master scale, you get paid again. And so it's just like, because you never know what some of these things, how they may be placed. And so often it's in the long run, it's a better deal than what it might appear, getting a bill saying, you owe $10 for, a session you played on.
Right. Man, well said. That's the truth of the matter. Sorry, we dove right into it. You brought up, that's perfect, actually. Yeah. So thank you for sharing with us about that. And, of course, anybody listening, if you want to find out more, just go to the AFM, which is the American Federation of Musicians. You can find out pretty much everything about them online, and each state and city has their own local. So for Nashville, it's 257.
Yeah. Aren't you 47?
Yeah. And out here, we're 47. Yeah. So I've been a member of both, and it has, been beneficial. So I totally agree.
Yeah.
Man, so what I always like to ask guests is, how did you get started, man? When did the music bug bite you?
Oh, gosh. Well, my parents both encouraged my sister and I to take instruments at age 5. And there's only so many that you can do, being that small. And so I started on piano, my sister on violin. And I always loved music, but I didn't love lessons that much on piano. I ended up switching I started playing trumpet at the same time in 5th grade. And then I saw somebody in middle school playing string bass, double bass. And that was really intriguing to me. And that's kind of what, probably solidified me becoming, more interested in music than anything else. And I don't know, I just loved what it did, I was first intrigued by just the way how it looked. And it was in middle school, and I saw, it was everybody playing violins and cellos, maybe a viola or two. And then there was this one lone bassist in the middle. And it's just like, wow, that not only looks cool, but when he started playing and hearing all this low end happen, it was really a statement. And, I think I still love bass for that reason, that it's one of the most powerful arrangers, that just by the fact of when you enter or when you drop out or what octave you choose. You know, you can do very simple gestures and speak volumes. You know?
I was just going to say, boy, you know, when the bass drops out, you can hear it immediately. It's because you're also feeling it, not just hearing it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So that, I think, you know, and it's funny. I mean, I play other instruments, but I always feel like the bass, I always feel like, okay, this is what I really do, you know?
I love that. Yeah, guitar is my primary, even though I play other instruments, and I think pretty much all of us can, you know, find some relation, you know, to that, right? It makes sense for us.
Yeah.
I wanted to start by acknowledging that you've played on so many, you know, dates, or we call them dates back in the day, sessions, right? Yeah. I'm getting stuck in my old 60s and 70s studio vernacular, you know?
Yeah.
You know, over 500 album credits, a bunch of films. You know, you're a composer, you're a producer as well. You've played with some of the, you know, some big musical heavyweights. When you think of people like Bill Frisell, you know, you're not talking about just your everyday run-of-the-mill pop music, you know, or even Chet Atkins, some of the Harry Connick Jr., some of these huge names that are so adept at many styles. But then you played with so many big pop acts too. Sheryl Crow, you know, Robert Plant. I mean, you're talking about legends too. So, and the list goes on. What I would love to hear from you is, you know, because I'm a huge believer in diversity, right? In styles. How did you set forth to do that? You start on piano, a little bit of trumpet, bass. You know, I think sometimes it's hard for us to focus, right? As musicians, we love everything.
Yeah.
Talk about your storied career and how you got to do all these cool things.
Wow. Well, it was kind of, you know, with bass, you know, you're kind of forced to play in a lot of different situations because almost everybody needs a bass player. I did grow up playing a lot of jazz in Illinois, where I'm from, and some orchestral stuff. I was a bass performance major for one semester and then decided not to. I knew that I wasn't going to be a career classical bassist, but I did end up finishing in theory composition at University of Illinois. And so I was playing in rock bands. You know, I accompanied my sister at fiddle competitions and did her band for a little bit. And so I was playing bluegrass music but jazz and rock probably more so. And I did think about Los Angeles for a long time as a possibility as a place to move. You know, in lots of different years, I kind of thought about it too, just because of what's happening musically, especially in the film world there. But I mean, it was interesting because when I moved to Nashville, and people that knew me either in a jazz circuit or a bluegrass circuit or a rock circuit knew that I kind of did, you know, it was kind of immersed in a lot of that stuff. And so I got asked to do kind of a range of things, and it's kind of kept that way. I mean, like this is kind of an interesting week because I played on a couple tracks on Molly Tuttle's record with Jerry Douglas producing, you know, which are big, you know, heavyweights in the bluegrass field. And then I'm going to work with Paula Cole this week, and then with Mike Stern and Keith Carlock and Bill Evans this weekend. And so it's kind of all over the place still, which is pretty fun, you know.
It's fresh, man. It really does.
Yeah. But you know, so I mean, I've been fortunate in terms of where it does stay. You know, I always thought the bluegrass guys thought I was a jazz guy. The jazz guys thought I was a bluegrass or a rock guy. And you know, I always think of myself as probably a rock guy first. But so I don't know. It's always kind of interesting what I get placed to do.
Well, I love that. I mean, bluegrass, jazz, and rock. That's such a great little, trifecta of styles. And, as we know, everything kind of, overlaps, right? There's great in everything that we do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And I don't know. I mean, in some ways, I don't know. I guess I've over time kind of thought of as having maybe a distinct thing to offer that I don't necessarily try to be a chameleon. I mean, I try to be what's as appropriate, but I think, there's so many players here in Nashville that, if you want somebody who can do a certain thing, if you've paid attention on records or a producer has paid attention on records, you'll be able to get that from a certain great player. And I think a lot of the time, I'm probably a color or a flavor that people want, for certain things, but, I'd be the first one to say I'm not the perfect one to play. I can't play slap bass, on slap upright bass. So of course I've called Dave Rowe or a handful of other people, and I can't bow very well. So, you would hire Edgar Meyer or a handful of other great people. So I don't pretend to try to do something I can't really do, or I try to tell people, it's so funny. Like I'll play on a recording, do a week of tracking or a few days of tracking, and then the very last thing they ask me if I brought a bow, and I'll go, oh gosh, this is going to negate everything that I did prior to this. They're going to just remember the last thing, that I don't play Arco very well.
Right.
Yeah. Or they'll have to go, okay, oh yeah, you can do that, but he can't do that very well. Yes. So
but there's no shame in knowing your weaknesses, right? Because in that sense, there's enough to go around for everybody.
Yeah. I think so too. Yeah, and I don't know. I always like knowing that I have the ability to do a good job at something, and if it feels like it's a compromise for somebody, then I don't always feel good about that.
Right. I mean? Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Man, that reminds me of a gig that I did years ago, probably maybe almost 20 years ago, with Nicholas Payton, the trumpet player.
Okay.
He's a monster, jazz. He saw me playing with Kirk Whalum.
Oh wow!
And Kirk's music is much more soul R&B jazz. It's jazz tinged, jazz influence. And I can play jazz, but I'm not like a bebop head. I am not.
I'm not either. Yeah.
So I'm not the first call bebop person. But Nicholas heard me play with Kirk, and for whatever reason, I guess he liked what he heard, so he called me to play a gig with him, and it was just one of those things where, they counted off the first tune, and it was like, 220, BPM. Swing groove, it's moving so fast. You can't even fathom, you're like,
yeah,
slow down. I need to figure out which bar I'm on.
Yeah. No, yeah. That's
I learned that lesson, Yeah. To what you were saying, hey, definitely acknowledge it. And I think for me, it was a long time ago. I was probably still in my late 20s, maybe. It just, the lesson was, if you have a sense that perhaps you're not the right person, don't be afraid to speak up.
Well, yeah, and then your reputation is still good for what they know that you do well, as opposed to being aware of what you don't know well. Don't give them the chance to let them hear you stumble.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So I love that we covered that too. So check. Perfect. Something else I wanted to talk about. You've been a longtime member of Lyle Lovett's band. It's since 1994. You've been Lyle Lovett's primary bassist.
Yeah. I started with him in '94. It was a gig that I wanted from a couple years beforehand, and I remember hearing him do. It was the Lyle Lovett and His Large Band record, which came out in, I think it was '88, and I thought that was a really cool record. And I'd see him on the Tonight Show. He's on Tonight Show so much at the time. It's like, this is a really interesting guy. And then I remember Joshua Judge's Ruth record, I think came out in 91. And it was just like, wow, this is so great. I'd love to play with him. And when I first moved to Nashville, I started kind of trying to bug people that were in his management and let it be known that I was interested in doing it. And
hard move.
Yeah, and I ended up contacting Ken Levitan, who had heard what was Lyle's manager, but there were some mutual friends that it wasn't completely inappropriate for me to talk to him. And, and he said that, Lyle has somebody, but feel free to stay in touch for whatever reason. And so I would call every once in a while and just check in. And I remember this was in 94. I'd been working with Peter Rowan for about a year or so, and was having a very lean summer. And I thought, well, I'll just call up Ken and see what's, to see if, even if it's not about Lyle, about something else. And he said, before I even finished saying hello, he says, oh, Lyle may need a bass player. And so, yeah. And so I just told him how much I would love to do it. And there was a bunch of kind of back and forth. He wanted me to meet me. And there were enough people that kind of had heard me in different situations to say that, well, that may not be a horrible idea to have me. So I ended up getting the gig about I got confirmed to do the gig about 2 weeks before they were going to go out on tour. And so it was like a huge catalog of music, but they kind of worked me in. They had one bass player who was leaving, and they wanted me to observe what he did for like the first week of the tour. And then I kind of gradually kind of take over in the set. And then within a week I was playing the show. But it's been a good run. And, he just had me on his records, and there's been certain years where I didn't do all of the touring due to having kids and but yeah, it's pretty much been around.
Well, let's talk about that, because there's a couple things that I want to bring to the forefront here. I don't care whether it's Lyle Lovett, a long time, very high end, big quote unquote, named artist, or if it's somebody newer. So the first thing that I want to recognize is that you said, man, I like this artist and I want to play with them even before it happened. So, you started bringing to fruition this goal, right? And you just said you latched onto it. So I don't care if it's Lyle Lovett or Dua Lipa, or whomever, fill in the blank of, today's big artists. What I like about what you did is you set your sights, and then you had the tenacity to call up management. So let's talk about that, man, because I think that's really smart.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think nobody doesn't like to hear that they're appreciated or somebody would want to work with them, and if you do it in a tactful, polite, professional way, that it's people will listen to you, or if they know that you have something to offer, again, kind of knowing your own limitations and strengths to know, okay, this could really work, because I know what I do is good for this. Right. To kind of being able to put yourself out there and allow people to know that, but also to be able to back it up if the door is open for you. Same way if somebody's vouching for you too, just to be aware, okay, because somebody's going to the lengths to say, yes, my friend here is good enough, they're putting their reputation on the line too, Well,
I wanted to talk about that too, because you also made sure that you built enough of a case, for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Having some common names that you can drop and say, oh, well, hey, well, so-and-so knows me and I'm friends with this person and I've worked with this person. You know, like you said, they can vouch for you, right?
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. I think that's good. I mean, like if you're a total unknown, even if you're the very best person in the world for the job, sometimes it's harder to do than somebody who's got a little bit of a track record. Hi, this is Viktor Krauss, and you're listening to The Career Musician with Nomad.
Blasting the stereotype of musicians. Follow us at The Career Musician Podcast.
Binge previous seasons of The Career Musician Podcast and subscribe for all new episodes.
I love the fact, again, that your versatility, you're a performer, you perform, you do touring gigs, whatnot, but you also compose and produce. You have a nice amount of film and TV credits here. How do you like to break up your routine? Or is it something that you premeditate, or do you literally just take, field the jobs as they come, or the opportunities, and then just
it's probably more of that, just whatever is happening.
Yeah.
The film and composing thing is always something I'd like to do more than I do, because it's something I just really love that, in terms of the writing, in terms of the emotional contact, writing for picture or trying to create some kind of storyline. That's one of my favorite places to be. But it really is. I mean, it is kind of like, however the work kind of comes in dictates what you do. And it's always funny. I mean, it always kind of like you end up doing one thing for a minute, and then it always comes in like pairs or three things, and then it's, I don't know, it's even the same thing with studios, like where you won't work at one studio for 2 years, and then you have two sessions at the same place, And,
Right. Funny, I just experienced that. True. Yeah. So true. Okay, so something else that is really important to us here at the Career Musician, we're launching a course in hopefully the late fall of this year to teach musicians, professional musicians who are at least aspiring, how to do really good professional home recordings, right? How to really master the art of getting your home-based recordings dialed in. And so, again, something else we just talked about offline before we, started the interview. You just had your home studio built out.
Yeah.
Talk about that. It's definitely a process. It could be fun, but it could also be nerve-wracking, I know. And talk about your foray into the home studio world.
Well, I've always kind of, I mean, like my first, back in high school, I had a Fostex X15 cassette multi-tracker, which, a little cassette thing. And I was always doing recordings at home and experimenting with things. And I'm a bit of a gear junkie. And so it's gotten kind of out of hand over the years. But I mean, as far as like, if you're doing a specialty thing for your individual instrument, I guess, would that be the way to approach it? Maybe to talk about if it's one, I mean, just to have, like to work. I mean, so many people work in Pro Tools or Logic or Nuendo, or it's people still work in Nuendo, right?
Yeah.
To become familiar with, how each one of the formats. I work more in Pro Tools and some in Logic, but I mean they all kind of work with each other fine. But having good preamps, I mean, like. I've got a few things that have kind of worked over the years. One nice compressor. There's, I guess, if you're editing, how would you like? Is there more of a direct way you want me to talk about this question?
I mean, you know what? It was such a broad question. I guess part of it I was referring to the actual build out of the studio that.
Okay.
because I love that, how you were on Instagram. I saw a post and there was some construction going on a couple houses down.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure.
You didn't hear a thing thanks to the guys who built this awesome studio for me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll talk about that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we kind of went extreme because we'd been working out of my house for years and years, which is hard to do if you have children, you have wife, and you have clients coming in. And so you're kind of tiptoeing around each other. And it was always a thought that we wanted to build, either get the studio out of the house, either to, a place that we'd rent, and we decided to build a totally separate structure. And it was something we thought about for years and years. I think our architectural plans dated back to 2017. And so we were kind of on and off, and then we decided to do it. And with this space, we made a, it's roughly 1,000 square foot building. And since it's mainly me that works here, I'll have clients coming. We've done a couple tracking things here, but it's primarily me. And so we made one kind of large space here that was also conducive to mixing, and then a separate vocal booth, which is back there, and then a lounge area, which is a little more live, and drums sound really good in there. And so we wired it so we could have options. And but we live kind of right in the middle of town, not downtown, but kind of we're near Belmont University and Vanderbilt University and the hospital. So there's the helicopters flying over. There's constant building here. There's a dog pretty much everywhere. It's a pretty noisy neighborhood. And it was really important to us that the one thing that really kind of was driving me crazy with all the construction that was happening here was mainly the backing up of the trucks, the constant noise. Like I have birds, in the recordings, dogs, and, it's just like so much of the workflow was interrupted.
Sure.
And so we made this building kind of versatile enough. So if the next person that bought this house, didn't want a studio, that it, could be a separate apartment or a mother-in-law suite or whatever. But we really did want to make it soundproof and have it sound really good. So we went to all the lengths of having a sound consultant build it to the point where you hear of floating floors, any kind of noise outside doesn't resonate. It's right on the ground, but at the same time, if something is pounding, you're not going to hear it. So it sits, the floor is independent. It sits on like these rubber, like little bumpers on top of a concrete slab. And then the walls, mainly in this space and in the vocal space, sit on, the drywall is totally independent from the studs. So the drywall sits on a what's called a clip system. It's this metal track that it attaches to this, and then the clip system has very little contact to the actual studs. And then this was a special drywall that has two pieces in one, which don't touch as well. And it's kind of like a similar thing as like building a wall within a wall. And probably some people that have built studios heard of green glue, which is, it's a buffer type of thing that's supposed to be sound absorbing and allow certain space not to resonate. So we did all this. And then, another thing we did, I don't know if you could, we put these huge windows in here, which are 9 feet tall, and under the disapproval of our contractor, our architect, and our sound person, because they were sound consultants, because it's essentially poking a giant hole into the structure. And so he said, well, it's really only going to be as strong as, as what you can do with these windows. And so we found an outfit out of Reno, Nevada, that specializes in either studio windows or houses that are near airports. So, we had these windows affixed inside the antique windows. That's
killer.
Yeah, so it really worked out. And then, you can't really see it, but behind me, that it's an antique door, and it has some seals that really make a huge difference. I guess they're from Canada or whatever, and if you buy a real studio door, you're looking at like almost $5,000, and I didn't really want to do that after we'd blown our budget on so much other stuff, and and then we ended up getting these sound panels made. And I don't probably can see it above the one. Some of it looks like a little bit like Swiss cheese.
Right.
Those are bass traps, and this room is about 16 feet tall, and it sounded like a gymnasium before we put all the treatment in. And and I mean, like buying acoustic treatment is about as fun as buying a roof in some ways. So I was really kind of, I don't want to do this. And then he sold me on it, and he came in and did an ultrasound on the room by just clapping and knowing what the decay of the room is and what was bouncing off of what. And it really turned out beautifully, I think.
It did. Our listeners can't see it, but it almost has like this old kind of chapel church vibe to it.
Yeah.
I can see in the video. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, our house was built in 1905, and so we kind of wanted it to. We took some of the attributes, like architectural stuff, from that house to kind of make it look like it might have always been here.
Right. So I love the fact that you put together a budget, you did it right, you hired all these different consultants, experts in their field, right, and you did the whole process. So to me, that's the ultimate quote unquote home studio, right? Even though it's not your home, it's still on your property. So that's
yeah.
But before that, you didn't allow the fact that you didn't have this to hinder you from recording, and that's the whole premise here. Once again, at the Career Musician, we stand for sustainability. How are you going to develop a sustainable career? Well, you have to work with what you have sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's what you did prior to that, and now obviously you're doing the same in a different light. But preamps, compressors. So I always say get a good preamp compressor or a combination thereof. Nowadays, of course, there's so many great plugins that you can use. That's almost not as important, but it still does make a difference, I feel, when you have a hardware unit. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. I recently got a 70s Universal Audio LA3A, and it's just like it's changed my life. I mean, it's just like in terms of where, just like I've gotten so much more ability of nuance in terms of like mic placement, because it's doing some of the work for you, but you can let the room do more things for you as opposed to getting it right up to it. I think it behaves differently than a plug-in.
Yeah, I so agree with that, because you can't reproduce physics of what's in a room with space and air, proximity, and all those things. I know we get close, but still, I still like having the hardware itself. Yeah.
Yeah. EQ kind of scares me. Like I love having the EQ after the fact as a plug-in now.
Right.
But every once in a while, I think it would be great to have, one of those GML, EQ.
And I think the biggest thing is, again, something that I really like to, remind all the listeners of our community is don't be afraid to experiment, right? How many times have you just started twiddling knobs and things to get sounds, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's
what we do.
That's so much of the fun. Yeah. And a good microphone too is really, really, it is. I mean, like I've bought some nice, I've kind of, as I've been able to get nicer microphones as a result, but something, I mean, even like if you spent, $500 on a 414 or something like that, such a versatile microphone, that's a great, I mean, there's plenty of others, just an example, but something that's a good starting.
Absolutely. What are some of the biggest projects you've done from home? Whether it was in your studio prior to this or this studio now, what are some of the bigger projects you've done right at your home rig?
Oh gosh. Like, bigger in the sense of like a whole record or
I guess, or even in the marquee sense of, oh wow, I can't believe you did that Alison Krauss record at your house, or that track, for whatever,
Yeah. Well, gosh, it's so funny. I mean, like this is kind of a funny story. It's not necessarily. This is kind of maybe expanding on the idea that you do really great work with minimal equipment. I played on James Taylor's last album, his American Standard record, and they had me come in and do overdubs on, at Treasure Island in Nashville, and then there was another time at Blackbird Studio, and then they wanted me to do a couple more tunes, but I was on tour, and I said, well, I always kind of bring something with me, just in the event that somebody wants me to do an overdub while I'm on tour. And so I didn't have my recording instrument, but I had one that sounded good with me, a microphone that's attached to my Ear Trumpet Labs, which is this nice company that does, they make one that's specifically for bass that kind of sits right under the bridge, but I had really nice luck with it. And then I had an Apogee 1 preamp, and I had Logic on a laptop. And so I was able to do what ended up being 2 of the Keeper bass tracks in a hotel. I did it in a hotel room oh gosh, it was near Duluth. Yeah. And but I had to be mindful of people opening, getting out of the elevator or somebody slamming a door or anything like that. But I mean, just to think that you can do that kind of work on something, where you don't have all your equipment and be able to, get a good sound that's passable for something that's forever,
Right. That's right. And it's such a large scale, so that's exactly the point. I love that. I think that, speaks to the technology that we have today, but also it's about the user and, how well your gear, right? And how to.
Yeah, I think, I mean, and if just kind of figuring out what are the sweet spots, and like I've kind of gotten to know, my own instrument that I usually take to a session that I can kind of gauge a good starting point of where this is going to be. And, if I move the microphone high up on the instrument, it's going to bring this one sound, or if I bring it closer to the bridge or lower, that it will bring a different sound. And I always like using a direct signal as well, off the pickup, one of the piezo pickups off the bass. It always helps me in terms of pitch. It also offers sustain that necessarily a microphone can't pick up. So they help each other. And so I'm always kind of, I've kind of arrived at a sound that I like. I don't usually send a whole lot of compression if I'm sending files, and just let people kind of work with what they have in mind. And usually people kind of end up knowing what they're, most of the time people know what they want and know what they're doing. Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's great. That's a good point, because you have to be, it has to be like vanilla enough to fit right in the middle,
Yeah.
Producers and engineers on the other end can still manipulate it to get what they want.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and then there's also, I mean, if you have a feeling that somebody's going to use, let's say, more of the microphone versus the DI or a certain component of somebody's sound, you might play to that reaction, or that nuance more so than the other way around. I don't know. Yeah.
No, it makes perfect sense. Very cool. Well, it's like I said, I can't believe we haven't connected while I was in Nashville, for those 8 years. We have a lot of the same mutual friends. So shout out to all of our homies back in the Ville.
Yeah.
This Nashville, this has been great. Before we go, man, I always love to ask everybody this. There's so many different opinions on the subject. How do you define success? Because I truly believe that everybody has a different way of looking at it.
Oh, gosh. Well, I think success can be just, I think, feeling happy about what you're doing. And, I mean, sure, being paid is wonderful. And, I mean, being paid as a musician, but I think in a lot of the, I've found that, a lot of the time stuff that doesn't pay as well is the stuff that I love the most. And there's other stuff that I, if you find passion in doing it, you don't often look at the check, but you can't do all that. I don't know. I think there's just a balance. Success is being happy in what you're doing, but also knowing that you can kind of take care of yourself and your family at the same time. I don't know. I guess.
Well said.
Yeah.
And what do you think you'd be doing if you weren't a career musician?
That's a good question. I've always, I love architecture. It's funny. My dad's business was, or is, real estate, and not as a broker, but an investor and that kind of stuff. So I used to do a bit of that too at the same time, before I moved here. And I always thought one of my favorite times was such the balance of actually just doing that side of my brain on the financial or real estate side, but then just working on stuff that I really love to do musically.
Just for fun. Right.
Yeah. And that was, sometimes I think with the, the hustle of being a musician in terms of keeping things going and feeling like it's always like the gig that you're doing in the moment, that you always think it's your last one, It's
always slipping through your fingers, right? Like, oh my.
Yeah. Or somebody's figured out, oh, okay, well, he's really terrible, or everybody figures out that you suck and that you're never going to be hired again, So.
Oh, you mean the fact of being an artist, of our internal dialogue on a daily, right?
Oh, yeah, that never goes away.
Yeah, so true, so true. I love that. And do you keep that up at all? Have you pursued the investing side, real estate investing?
Yeah, some. We've got a couple rental properties here in town, and
I think very wise.
Yeah, well, it was very handy during the pandemic. When none of us were doing anything. It was kind of I was glad we had those.
If there were listeners out there that were curious on how to get started in that, what would you direct them towards?
Well, it is very hard as a musician from a bank standpoint, because you might as well tell them you're a pedophile or you've got some kind of criminal record. Yeah. And I mean, as anyone knows, listen to it's very difficult without W-2 income or 1099 income, and even refinancing your home is like you're on trial. Even though you have a perfect track record, and so that makes it tough. It's
sorry, yeah.
What's that?
It does feel like you're on trial sometimes.
Yeah.
those loans. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you're presenting all this stuff. And even though, you may have a perfect track record and your credit score may be really high, they still, are very scared of you. And, a lot of the time that I've felt I've had to kind of, most lenders really want to have 25% down these days on something. In terms of rental property, I always look at, always have to make sure that it's that there's cash flow. Like your short-term investment has to be paying. You have to see black right away, as opposed to red. You can't necessarily think in terms of, well, over time I'm going to. Which is great. You invest for the short term and the long run. And the long run, you're always, just as the nature of real estate, you're probably always going to make a profit unless, you end up in a place like Detroit or you don't even know, but that's now coming up.
That's bouncing back. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's bouncing back. But, just to watch the market that you don't overbuy, which everybody's doing right now.
Everybody right now.
Yeah. So people may end up getting hurt in the long run. So just to kind of, I use a mortgage calculator that I determine how much you can put down on something, how much your taxes and insurance, and then you also find out how much they always call it ROI. Just how if you can surpass your note and then surpass your expenses, your taxes, your insurance, and and then good tenants are always helpful too.
And being able to manage the property and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah. And being able to if you have time and skill to be able to handle some of the repairs on your own and be able to manage it yourself, all those things add up. I don't know. That's I like talking about that stuff too.
Yeah, same here, and that's why I'm a huge proponent in it. I think it's so important for musicians, again, for that sustainability, to have something like that they can keep operating in the background, right?
Yeah,
not something that necessarily requires a daily, attention.
Yeah, I've never found that the balance juggling having property and that has been too much. Right. And I think it's a good part of your brain to use.
Yes.
Too. Yeah. But I do think it is key to make sure that it has short-term return.
Positive cash flow. Yeah.
Yeah. Positive cash flow, just because you don't want to carry it.
That's right.
If you have a lean period or if you don't have a renter for a month, that it's your gross rent always exceeds your note.
Man, Victor, thank you so much for sharing wisdom with us, because again, listeners, I can't emphasize enough, when Victor says you may have a lean period, or you don't carry your tenants, or you don't want to carry your vacant property when you don't have tenants. These are all things to really take into consideration. So, man, I love it. From one career musician to another.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful and stoked to now know you as a friend.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You're listening to the Career Musician Podcast with creator and host, Nomad. With 20 plus years of experience in the music industry, Nomad has done just about everything to earn a living as a career musician. From being music director to celebrity artists, playing iconic arenas and stadiums, composing for film and TV, and even playing your average local club gigs, he's done it all. Nomad's mission is to empower musicians across the globe with strategies for a sustainable career while blasting stereotypes, and to bring you tried and true wisdom from his colleagues in this crazy business we call music.